Hello, everybody, and welcome to the best show you're going to see on TV tonight, which is the worst president ever. And we have a huge panel today, so we're going to start introducing them right away and get to the bottom of this. First of all, this person is very famous. You'll see him on The Lawyer's Den on the IBM TV network. He's also a graduate of the University of Southern California, where he received his bachelor's degree, law degree at The Ohio State University. He also received a master's at New York University, currently a professor at Georgia College. Let's welcome in one of our panelists today, Adam Lamparero, the professor. Good to
Thanks,
have you
Nick.
here.
Great to be here.
Yes. We're going to find out tonight who is the worst president ever, because this is our finale show. And with that, we have on our panel today, also you'll see him on Modern Investing. He's also a graduate of UCLA. I guess USC and UCLA, you guys don't get along. But then he went to University of Miami School of Law. Then he went to NYU, where he also received an MBA. Let's bring in from Modern Investing, Peter Bennett. Peter,
Hey,
welcome to the show about
hey Nick.
the worst president ever. Okay. And then on the final four, but there's going to be two more joining us later on. We're going to bring in this gentleman from Canada. He's also on Modern Investing and also Chess Story. Let's bring in from Canada our favorite Canadian, Dosa Donya, Sasha Star. How are you doing? Yeah. Okay. And so we're going to start with our candidates today. As we well know, we're going to look at the worst president ever. And maybe the thing is, Peter, you can give us an introduction. Our four candidates, which are Trump, Biden, Clinton, and George Bush Sr. So if you're prepared, counselor, give us your intake on the four candidates for tonight in the finals.
Sure. First of all, just a couple of points about the show in general. We've gone through many presidents, and I've learned a lot. Even if you look at the presidents we consider the greatest, Thomas Jefferson, George Washington, they had flaws, and they were even presented as possible bad presidents, because of their flaws. But then you look at 60 years of presidents in the 1800s, where they had the divided nation over slavery, and they had such difficult issues. And now today we have so many difficult issues. So it's just amazing, because we had no perfect presidents. That's the bottom line. And all of them had flaws, and maybe because they had to deal with so many issues. I mean, each one has to deal with hundreds of issues internationally, domestically, economically, and it's hard to get everything perfect. The number two point is, there's an expression: you are what you eat. And my expression would be, you believe in politics what you watch. So the nation is so divided now, and I blame the media. I think there's three styles of media out there. The vast majority of media, maybe 90%, is extremely liberal. And they are so liberal that they view it as their mission to educate people. And that means pushing a narrative that, no matter what. So anything that goes against the narrative, they either won't report on it or they'll give it very short shrift. Then you have on the right side, which would be a typical example, would be OAN or Fox News at night. You have extreme right viewpoints. And that also divides the nation, because they'll almost never say anything positive, about a Democrat. And so then, for me personally, my main viewership is Fox News during the day, which is very different than Fox News night. A lot of people say, "Oh, Fox is terrible," but there's two Foxes. There's Fox News and Fox Night. Fox News night is totally opinion, and they at least admit it. But so you are what you watch. So a lot of people, if you only watch mainstream media, you think Trump is a horrible person. He's a racist. And if you watch only the right side, like Fox News at night or OAN, you might think, oh, Obama did nothing good, or Trump is flawless. And Trump is not flawless. I don't think he's the worst president, but he's not flawless. So I just want to say that the best thing people could do in the nation is to go to that moderate viewpoint. And the trend, and then I'll get into just the president for a second, but the trend has been that way. MSNBC and CNN are dropping like rocks. Hardly anybody watches them anymore. They're too to the right. But the New York Times is no different in terms of their presentations. So if you want to expand your knowledge base, at least compare all the sources of information. And especially, I would say, I look at foxnews.com all day long when I don't have time, because you do see all the news, at least, rather than filtered news. So that said, I'll be a little more brief, but out of these presidents, look, George Bush Jr. and Obama, I don't even think belong there. I didn't really want to see them there. I wanted to see Hoover really as maybe a third one against Trump and Biden. But we know it's going to be Trump and Biden, but I would have thrown maybe LBJ in, or maybe certainly Hoover. But look, George Bush Jr. had a mixed presidency. He had a very successful economy, and that alone, you would say, he had a very good economy. He had some issues for sure. He got us into a war in Iraq, but it wasn't necessarily his fault, because Saddam Hussein misled him intentionally, because Saddam Hussein wanted Iran to view Iraq as having nuclear weapons. So he pushed this narrative so hard that the CIA believed it. So, he made a bad decision. He was blamed for Katrina, and it was mostly local. And the media blamed him. Obama was mixed too. I mean, he was a great communicator, first of all. And that alone puts him ahead of Trump and Biden, who are not good communicators at all. I mean, for their own reasons, in different ways. But, Obama had a strong economy. One of the strongest economies, not as strong as Reagan, but up there with Kennedy and some of the other great economies. But then Trump's economy actually did improve it a little bit more. But he also had his issues. He let ISIS flourish in Iraq. There's a lot of questions about his Iran nuclear deal. He withdrew. He created Obamacare, which is really a mixed bag. A lot of people are helped by Obamacare, but a lot of people are hurt. And I said back then, the system was very flawed, but bringing the government in at this level has created all kind of different issues. And the old system could have been fixed with a bunch of tweaks. So, but again, it isn't Obama. It's never going to be Obama. It's never going to be it's never going to be George Bush Sr. In the end, we're going to be down in the polls and probably in the arguments to Joe Biden and Trump. And then I get back to, you are what you watch. If anybody on this panel or anybody out there only watches liberal news, which is 90%, and says, "Oh, I hate Fox. They lie or whatever." First of all, they may not know that, again, there's Fox Day and Fox Night. But if you watch that, you've got one viewpoint, and you're not going to be swayed unless you change your media point of view. And the same thing with the other side. If you only watch the night Fox, then you're going to say, "Oh, Trump is flawless." So that's where I leave. It's going to be Biden and Trump.
Well, we'll take a look at that later when Mark Lee gets here. But Adam, can you give us your opening statements, counselor, about the worst presidents ever on the finale?
Sure. I think when you talk about who the worst president is, you first have to establish a criteria by which to make that determination. And I think a major part of that criteria is looking at the policies the president's advocated for and adopted, and domestically and internationally. And using that criteria, I think the African-American community tonight, along with the Hispanic community, should be thanking Donald Trump for the lowest unemployment rate in their history. I think all Americans should thank Donald Trump for not getting us into a needless war. And I note that tonight, Sasha is going to retract his prior statements and realize that Trump is nowhere near the worst president in the United States. When it comes to Bill Clinton presided over an outstanding economy and a budget surplus that unfortunately George Bush Jr. squandered with a needless war. But he was fiscally responsible, and he was a fairly effective president. So he's nowhere near the worst presidents. Now, when it comes to George Bush Sr., admittedly, he entered the Iraq War was probably a mistake. Saddam Hussein had created some semblance of stability in the Middle East. And between him and his son, they destabilized the Middle East. The second thing that George Bush Sr. was not good at was the economy. In 1992, when the economy started to tank, he showed apathy and didn't adopt any policies that really addressed that. And that's why he lost to Bill Clinton. But he did do a lot of good things too, and is nowhere near the worst president. There's only one person on this list, and I know everyone on this panel is going to agree with me tonight. The only person on this list that is the worst president is Joe Biden. A, he's incompetent. B, his policies are not only ineffective, but they are quite injurious. And 3, he literally has no original ideas or thoughts and is, in fact, probably being controlled by his advisors. He inspires no one. He will not inspire anyone. And he is presiding over the most divided country. We are more divided than ever, and he is making it more divisive with his embracing of identity politics and the like. There is only one person on this list that is the worst president ever, Joe Biden. And I would also say that even though we're not discussing this, one of the best presidents ever was Richard Nixon. Thank you.
Okay, Tricky Dick. Let's move on to opening statements.
And I would like to say that I forgive Peter for going to UCLA because he rehabilitated himself with his NYU degree. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Okay, let's see. The audience here does not agree. Wait a minute. Here's what they do say. Turn off your TV. Good idea. Okay, so with that, Kim, opening statements, please, Counselor.
Oh, you want me?
Of course.
Okay. Hi, guys. Happy President's Day. So, Peter, you could not have said it any better. The media truly has dictated how we perceive the presidents, whether it's true or not. So if you're watching Fox News, you're going to perceive things one way. So again, I think the truth in journalism has ruined us because there is no truth in journalism anymore. There is no more accountability, which is what we want to change here at Pod TV. Not that I'm throwing in a pitch for us, but let's take a look. You know, to me, the one president I believe is the worst president in the world is not really on this list, is Abe Lincoln. I missed that night. The other one I really have always hated, not personally. I've loved him personally, but his policies, everything about him, I think sent us into a downward spiral was Obama. His healthcare plan was definitely not in the best interest of the country. But when we're taking a look at the 4 on the plate, I don't think Biden has had enough time to, really ruin things that bad. And when I take a look at the criteria, to me, it was who did the best for the best interest of the people. And also, fatality rates. And I still say Trump had the highest fatality rate in history of all times, whether it was because of COVID or not. It was knee-jerking. He didn't fire the people he should have fired. He didn't hire the people he should have hired or rehired, or he fired the wrong people. I mean, it was a collage of a mess that sent us into a downward spiral. We sent out, stimulus checks that really didn't stimulate anything, that maybe helped a few people, but they went to the wrong people. Nothing was done right. Granted, it was our first pandemic like this, and so people are going to make mistakes. But even George Bush kind of got it right when we got hit with terrorists, and he came back with an iron fist, and we pursued the terrorists the way we should. He united the country. George Bush united the country when we were hit with such horrific terrorism. But Trump didn't unite us. He never has. That was never his intention. He always divided us. He divided us with them and us. And he said it even on his inaugural speech, them and us. He separated us and kept us separated. He never united us, not when we needed it the most. He didn't unite us. It was always a fight over what could be used, what couldn't be used. So I think Trump is definitely in the top ranking of the worst on this list. Biden probably there, the running second. Clinton, I just don't like him, but it's not enough to say he was the worst. So, integrity doesn't rank, I guess. But so that's my climatic moment. It's not as good as Peter's and Adams and probably Sasha's and Mark's, but it's what I got.
It's great. Let's go to Canada and see what Sasha Starr has to say. What do the Canadians think?
Okay, I would like to, if possible, to eliminate from this list two presidents who had two election victories and had two terms, Clinton and Obama. I fail. You know what? I just can't believe that Americans could allow to elect somebody who is the worst president ever to the second term. I'm of very high opinion about American friends, and I don't think they would allow themselves to get in such calamity. So that leaves Trump. Actually, you know what, Adam? It's okay. He's probably not the worst president. It's hard to see who is worse. Well, okay, I have one who is worse than him. The problem with Trump is that he is first president in recent history who failed to peaceful transition of power. He absolutely failed to follow the protocol, the routine, that you can call it any way you want it. It's probably part of the Constitution, or at least everybody knew about it except Trump. But that doesn't excuse him. So the worst thing, what he committed, the worst things were actually after he ended his term. And the only term, never mind his two impeachments or so on, probably that's not that significant, but that's what a record. Two impeachments, failed to peacefully transfer the power. I even don't know where to start and where to finish. It's just incredible. But the only president who is still worse than Trump, and now today, by the way, we are all paying for that. It's definitely Bush Sr. What's happened with Bush Sr.? He was a faceless vice president with very successful President Ronald Reagan. And basically, he was just there as a kind of a furniture at the best. And all of a sudden, he became president, and it was expected because Ronald Reagan was so successful that Bush, and with his biography, resume, so he was elected president after Ronald Reagan. Now, Ronald Reagan was the first one who defined Soviet Union as an evil empire. So if Bush Sr. was his faithful vice president, I would assume that he shared that vision. So finally, when thanks to Reagan, the evil empire ceased to exist, all Bush had to do is just to confirm that engraved in stone, get all the nuclear arsenal out of Russia, and just end all this nightmare. And today, poor Biden, in his, I don't know, how old is he, 88, 98, or whatever, the guy wants to sleep. All of a sudden now he has to really make enormously important decisions. First of all, Putin today, I was listening to his 1 hour speech. He declared that he's no longer interested to talk to Macron and the German chancellor and so on. There's only one man in the world that he would agree to talk to. It's Joe Biden. Now, what are they going to talk about it? There is a huge bluff on Putin's ultimatum. And so far, Biden was doing more or less a pretty good job, by the way. However, now it's all came to the head. Now it's either Putin is bluffing, and then his bluff has to be called. Or if he's not bluffing, he's for real, then it's probably West who is bluffing. So now Biden has to figure out with his advisors or whoever he's listening to, when he's awake, he has to figure out how to get the West, US including, out of this dangerous, explosive situation. Is Biden capable of doing that? If yes, that's fine. If not, then he is a great contender to be the worst president, that's for sure.
Okay, we'll get opening statements from Mark Lee, worst president ever. What are your thoughts, Mark?
Well, trying to see if this computer will work, and right now it's giving me a headache. So right now we might.
Oh, it's giving a headaches. I'll substitute for Mark Lee. Okay. First of all, you guys got to wake up and smell the coffee. You Trump Snickers. Let's go take a look and see Trump's record. Forget what Adam said and take what Peter had and flush it down the toilet. Because number one, what Trump did created a wealth divide in this country, which is huge, by creating huge tax breaks for the rich and pummeling the poor. Till today, 50% of the population that are watching this show don't even have $1,000 in their name. And a recent statistic came up. The top 10% have $861,000 in their retirement plans. The bottom 90%, $6,000. The wealth divide is clearly on Donald Trump, but that's not all. That's not all. He faked winning the election. What could be worse than having a liar as your commander in chief? Is have a guy who comes out and says, I won. And he didn't win. He lost both elections. He lost to Hillary in the popular vote. He lost again to Joe Biden, and he continues lies to the American public and says,
You sound like Stacey Abrams.
But wait a minute. That's not all. We have another special. He kisses North Korea's rear. I mean, come on. We're the United States of America. Kim Jong-un. What sort of foreign leader is this guy? He's not a leader. He's a moo guy. And the thing is, you're going to back Donald Trump? Are you got to be serious? But that's not all. I don't have 3. I have 4 for you, Adam. COVID-19, the reason he lost everything is, of course, he lost on the COVID issues. Okay. And the real problem is he didn't even recognize COVID to be an issue. He had no way to combat it. He was clueless. And what pointed out this guy's total incompetency is he had no way to deal with COVID-19. And then his base, they revolt against COVID and say, I'm not going to take the vaccine even if you make it. Keeping this lingering on all the way into the Biden administration. So clearly the winner tonight is, with no question, is Donald Trump the worst president? The answer has to be yes. And with that, I will defer to my esteemed colleague, Mark Lee. You heard my opening statements. Not that I would strongly disagree with Peter and Adam who want Donald Trump, but let me tell you something. Donald Trump needs to be flushed down the Donald doorstep.
You owe Mr. Trump an apology, Nick.
For what? What, telling the truth? I would agree. For
I
telling the
must
truth.
start signing my cards.
Dirty Don got swept out of the election.
All right, let Mark go.
Mark Lee,
Then we're ready to scrum. Wait, we're not ready to scrum yet. Let's Mark go.
I was just doing opening statements.
Oh, I can't look. I know. I can't wait to go after you, Nick, for that.
That's just opening statements.
Mark.
Moo, Mark.
We're going to see if I can come on and if this lovely computer is going to work or not. But right now, there's a lot of people that are in the candidacy. Definitely, I would say that one of those people is none other than our current president, because I'm finding some surprising results that are going on. And I was actually worried about what these results have been putting out. But a lot of people are frustrated. But if he wins, he may have to win with an asterisk, because like some people have said, has he had enough time to actually get to be the worst after only a year in office? Trump had more than a year, and a lot of things were going on in his space and time, including some things around whether race relations have improved or not improved, and whether things have gone on in the class side as well. So therefore, Trump might be a candidate, and believe it or not, there might even be some people that might consider Obama to be a candidate as well, because there are a lot of things were going on in his space also that some people were not too pleased with, including some of the grassroots organizers, which is part of the area that he came out of. So it'll be interesting to see when I give you the results and everything, what some of the people have been saying in that regards. Ironically, I thought that the person that I know Sasha has been lobbying for would get a lot more votes than were out there, but apparently a lot of people like Mr. Bush. I'm not exactly sure why, but they like him, even though Sasha has been trying to make an argument as to why that should be not the case. So as of right now, there's a lot of different things that are going on, and I'd be fascinated to hear some of the opinions of some of my esteemed colleagues, because definitely when it comes to running businesses, there has been one person that was just in office that has not done all that well. And we're even seeing maybe some of the results of some of his bad business practices with some of the bad business practices that are going on now, even though some people might be blaming Biden for what's going on in the NFT community and all of that, as they've been losing a lot of trades, and some of them may be following Biden's footsteps and all of that, or they may be following Trump's footsteps. But I'm actually leaning right now to thinking that we might need not one, but two worst presidents, and they might be back to back. But that's just some of my thoughts in that regards. And I'd love to hear whether folks think that I may have a point, because we may have to do one with an asterisk and the other that has got it. But then, hey, there's a possibility he might run again as well, so he can improve his status. So who knows how we're going to make this whole thing happen in that regards.
Well, here's how we do it.
All right.
We're on to the scrum. So,
Okay.
anybody have opinions?
So I would like to start with your points, Nick, quickly. And
My
then
good
I'd like
point.
to do
Yeah,
a
go ahead.
quick contrast, because I didn't even say, but I'm going to argue that Biden is the worst, even though he's had limited time, because I think he's the worst decision maker, because every decision has been wrong, and there's been very little right, but there's been a lot of damage done in 1 year, an incredible amount. First of all, on the tax break, totally disagree with you. You know, again, liberal news might have said, oh, the tax break is for the rich. The rich did gain from the tax break, but that's because the middle class and the working class gained, and that was the way it was structured. But everybody gained just about. Two, the election, he had a right to contest the election. He never even was the courts never even considered it. But he had a right to say, you know, just like Al Gore did, you know, and Al Gore spent weeks and he brought it to the Supreme Court. So he had a right. Now, admittedly, some of the protesters went too far, but he said peacefully, you know, gather in Washington. And he asked for a lot of National Guard, and he suggested to Pelosi that they post National Guard. And then hundreds of people went into the Capitol. Some of them innocently, because they thought they could. Many, but they didn't belong there, and many illegally. But he's not responsible for a few hundred people. But he never said revolt. He said, I want to be heard. And just like Al Gore did. In North Korea, I don't even understand that point, because he was trying to get along with a country that's trying to develop nuclear weapons, just like people criticize people who want to get along with Russia. It's like, you know, you don't have to give in to Russia. You don't have to give in to North Korea, but it's better to start on a friendly footing and try to negotiate from there rather than start with an unfriendly footing. That's the way all negotiations in business and politics should go. Now the contrast. First of all, I was going to do that later, but COVID. So more deaths occurred in 21 than 20. Yes, it is true that more deaths occurred under Trump because he was president for 4 years compared to 1 year of Biden. But this last year, 21, was the biggest year of deaths, even though we had the vaccine. Now, look at the performance of the two. Trump developed a vaccine that people said would take 4 or 5 years in 1 year. And thank heaven, or who knows, we'd still be in the heart of a pandemic if somebody took that attitude. Biden promised masks at the beginning of 21. He said, home tests. He said, we're going to have 500,000 home tests, and we're going to bring them to you, and it's going to help everything, solve everything. At the end of the year, December, 12 months after he promised it, they were still in negotiating with the test companies to get the home tests in the market. I mean, speed versus nothing. Speed versus nothing. Now, a few other points of contrast. Trump left a very healthy economy. GDP was increasing much quicker than Obama, and also manufacturing was coming home, which was a very big thing because of his tariffs and everything. That's a huge problem for the America in the future, because we're still dependent on China. But at least he began to bring a lot of manufacturing back to the Midwest. Inflation when he left was 1.6%. The recent numbers have been showing 7.5%. The consumer price index for January was 9.5 and 9.7%, depending on who you're listening to. That is a huge tax on Americans. You're talking about people who don't have $1,000. What happens to retirees? What happens to people when if their money is worth 10% less in a year, or 7%? And I think we talked about this in Modern Investing with Sasha. I am arguing that we are entering a long period of inflation now that's been triggered by his actions. by the supply chain problems, which he didn't fix at all. Trump would have fixed that in 2 days. Some of the problems, like the trucks not being allowed into California, he could have done something about that. Crime, police deaths are up 59%. 1 year later, and crime is up to a high when under Trump it was low. Contrast crime. All those dead policemen and dead people and people who are victims of crime cannot be undone. It's only a year, but they're dead. The damage is done, just like the COVID damage. Immigration, 2 million people are coming into the country every year. Trump had fixed the border just about. The wall was working. And admittedly, again, I'm not a Trump lover in some ways. Look, we did need to fix the immigration problem, which both sides have never done. We need lots of immigrants. We need immigrants that aren't criminals, that aren't coming from 159 countries as they are now, many of them terrorist countries. Nobody's checking them. Nobody's even checking a lot of these people for COVID, and other diseases are coming into the country. Fentanyl is now the #1 killer in America of 0 to 45-year-olds. It wasn't that big a problem relatively. Now it's killing so many young people, and it's almost all coming from Mexico. So immigration, the border went down the tubes. Crime, down the tubes. Afghanistan, America's second failure, arguably, besides Vietnam. And okay, if you want to pull out of Afghanistan, I could see the arguments for it. But the way he did it, his generals told him, don't pull out quickly. He pulled out for political expediency right away, leaving almost $1 trillion in equipment in the country, leaving hundreds of Americans who are still there, some of them, they won't admit it, but they're still there, tens of thousands of Afghan allies who are translators and who are depending on the United States, and now the Taliban are hunting them down and killing them. And the country is starving. So that was a huge failure. Trump didn't get us into any wars. Meanwhile, I'll just conclude with this too. Internationally, Trump didn't get us into wars. He did the terrible thing of actually making Europe chip in what they promised for our defense, towards NATO, because they had promised 2%, so he put pressure on them. So people said, oh, he's not working with them. Yeah, he's trying to get them to chip in what he wants. Now China and Russia have created an alliance, basically. And you know what? Russia can send more and more of their oil to China. China desperately needs their oil. This is going to be a huge problem for the United States on energy. And it's not going to get undone because economically, we are facing huge inflation now on energy because China has an endless thirst for energy because they are burning coal and they are destroying the planet, by the way, China. And no matter how much environmental work we do, China's putting out so much pollution with coal. And, but now Russia can ship oil to China more and more. And now Europe's going to be more and more starving for, and then you look at the energy prices, policies of Biden are a disaster too. I mean, closing down pipelines, regulation, it's all going to be hurting us for a decade. Watch inflation.
Well, let's start with number one that you don't want to really talk about, the wealth divide. I mean, this is a Trump policy where the top 10%, control 50 to 70% of all the assets,
and it wasn't there before.
And the other 50% get nothing at all. They have table scraps. They have 2%.
Was that not there before, Nick?
He's okay with it. I'm just letting you know what Donald did.
Did it change, or was it there before?
It is increasing under the Trump administration as he created huge tax breaks for the rich and, of course, poverty for the poor. Then let's go take a look at the elections. Winning, you keep saying, well, no court would listen. Do you know why no court would listen to his fake claims? He had zero evidence to bring to court. What happens? You go to court.
Well, he had lots of evidence. The election
was stolen. He went to 64
Yeah, the evidence is that Biden got 81 million votes.
He went to 64 courts and couldn't produce any evidence.
They didn't.
Got thrown out.
They never looked at the evidence. Nick.
But I'm going to make it even worse. Even worse. You started out with the border issue. Remember his promise. We're going to build a wall. And Mexico's going to pay for it. A complete lie. I mean, the thing is, do you want a liar in chief or do you want a commander in chief? How would you like to elect somebody whose first statement out of his mouth is a complete lie? If I need a liar, I can just bring in anybody and say anything. Oh, wait a minute. I've got Donald Trump. He'll say anything to anybody, and he doesn't even know what the truth is. Remember, George Washington could not say a lie. And the thing is, the problem with Trump, he doesn't know the difference between the truth and a lie. And so he's a big problem child, definitely deserves the worst president ever.
All right,
Adam, do you have
Nick-
any comments, any
Nick,
additional things to add to this?
I do
Why you
have
vote
things
for
to add
Donald
because,
Trump?
like I said previously, we have to look at the policies of each president to determine whether they are the worst or, in fact, the best. And like I said previously, on behalf of the African American and Hispanic community, I want to thank President Trump for the lowest unemployment rate. On behalf of the African American community, I want to thank President Trump for the First Step Act, which reduced prison sentences for many African Americans, unlike Joe Biden, who supported the Crime Control Act in '94. On behalf of the middle class, I would like to thank President Trump for the tax cut, which doubled the standard deduction and had other benefits for the middle class. On behalf of all working Americans, I want to thank President Trump for border security, which, of course, Joe Biden, with his bad judgment, has let become a problem again. And on behalf of the world, I want to thank President Trump for not getting us into a needless war like George W. Bush did in the early 2000s. Now, the problem with Biden, like Peter said, he has terrible judgment, he has no common sense, and he's a professional politician who panders based on public opinion polls and has no real principled grasp of public policy. But I think what tonight really calls for is for Sasha to look at Canada's leader tonight and say, stop this authoritarianism and bring back democracy. Because like President Trump, who lifted people up, it's about time to stop tearing people down. I suspect the panel will agree with me and join me in that.
Well, we'll see what Sasha has to say about this since you decided to attack his country, similar to what we did in 1812.
But not him.
No,
his
just
country.
attack his country. Burn down Ottawa. We don't care.
I expect all of you to thank Mr. Trump tonight, too. I haven't heard that yet. Very ungrateful people.
Those truckers want to burn down Ottawa. Excuse me. So we don't have to do that anymore.
And Nick,
Sasha,
you benefited from that tax cut from Trump, didn't you?
excuse me. That's a personal ad hominem attack. Let's hear from Sasha. Let's hear from Sasha.
That's true.
About that.
Similar show in Canada would be called the worst prime minister of Canada, not the president, since we don't have one. And our wonder boy, Trudeau, I think he would have a great chances to be the worst prime minister.
Trudeau isn't in the mix yet,
For sure.
I understand.
No, we may put to
We haven't gotten the international worst leader yet.
Look, just think about something. Justin Trudeau, he's Prime Minister of Canada, but Prime Minister don't have in Canada nearly as much power as presidents in the United States. So there is a parliament, there's different bodies in Canadian politics. The most important thing to understand about Canada is that this is a country of law and order. This truckers' actions during the last month, they basically, they have some legitimate claims, probably. However, the concept of law and order was definitely suffering in the last several weeks. And it was, if it wouldn't be Trudeau, I'm pretty sure any other prime minister would be evoked definitely at the end of the month of protests, of paralyzing the country, paralyzing the ambassador bridge, so all the shipment of goods between the United States and Canada came to the halt. A lot of businesses were suffering, not only in Ottawa, which was natural, but even those who were relying on parts and machinery to be brought from the United States to Canada or vice versa. They were all suffering, and that had to come somehow to an end. And Trudeau just did it, but not alone. Of course, he had support from different provinces, from Canadian Mounted Police, and basically, I think it's all done today. Many protesters were handcuffed, thrown to jails, and they had great support, by the way, from American groups, from white supremacists, from many other fractions, thanks to a proliferation of social media and so on. So it was, at the end of the day, I think it was really ugly what they've done, because as you're talking about peaceful protest, it was nothing. It was not peaceful protest what they've done. It was
No peaceful
it
protest
was-
there at all and everything. But coming back to the presidents and all of that, I've
Okay.
got a question for Adam and everything. And that is that sometimes when the current administration wants to do things that may be of beneficial aspects to society, they get into a whole roadblock. And the roadblock is led by some of the Trump supporters that are still in office and all of that. I will give a case in point. That called the Black Farmers, which used to be very much of a part of society that was very prevalent in society at one point, maybe 100 years ago or something like that, when there were nearly 1 million Black farmers. But then Biden came up with an idea that he was actually going to pay some of these farmers for some actions that were done over several years that were actually very much harmful and took a lot of land from them. And therefore, there's been even some money that was going to be coming back and all of that. They were supposed to fill out a form, letting folks know what they were going to use this money for and along those lines. And then as soon as the money was en route, there were some white farmers and some Republican leaders that were like, no. And they've kind of held that money up for some time. So that is an idea of something that Biden might have done that would have been a positive thing, but it got roadblocked. And we do know that that does happen in politics quite a bit. I would also point to another thing that was going on in the Trump era. We heard a lot about it during the Trump era. We haven't heard as much about it during the Biden era. Not that I don't think it doesn't exist, but I don't know that there has been as much attention to it as was going on at that time, that being the opioid crisis, which was definitely going on during the Trump era and things along that line. So that's another one that I might want to be looking more closely at what some of Trump's policies were. And when it comes to the virus and this whole pandemic that we're in the middle of, I would also make an argument within that realm, because Biden at least has been having some conversations around some of those folks that are anti-vaccine and that are vaccine hesitant and things along those lines, whereas I did not see that enough from Mr. Trump. He was actually, in some cases, even putting out some theories that didn't make much sense as to what you should do in terms of the cure and in terms of even the reasons that you might not want to get vaccinated. So
That's because he didn't know what to do,
import
Mark.
feed.
He was clueless. That's the reason he didn't say anything. The
Yeah, the
man,
vaccine's about as
Trump is
effective as a
completely
prayer.
clueless when it comes to medicine, and he was all discovered on the COVID-19 thing. The man is clueless, and he doesn't know how to pick people. Look, half his cabinet turned over. He hired and fired people like it was a revolving door.
And that
Why?
hasn't happened under
Because he
Biden.
doesn't know how to hire the right people to begin with. The man is basically incompetent. He's definitely big time incompetent. He shows it with Trump University, which went under. He shows it with his aircraft that went under. Shoot, he couldn't even run a gambling casino. How can you not make money at a gambling casino?
7
Ask
bankruptcies.
7
You have
corporate
180
Actually,
businesses.
I
You have
forgot.
180
Oh, give me
successful
a break.
businesses.
The most
and you're
incompetent
pointing to
person
the
in
7.
America, and the only reason he's wealthy is inherited money. The
I
only
forgot
reason.
That's not
actually.
true.
He
And
couldn't run a
Nick,
he couldn't run a lemonade stand. Let alone
Apart from Trump being
he could
worth
not run a lemonade
nearly
stand.
$6
let
billion,
alone-
Nick, I have to say I forgot tonight on behalf of all Americans to thank Trump for helping
For
us
what?
to
Not-
get a
not being
vaccine
able to
in
run a
record
lemonade
time and
stand?
saving lives. That's a
No,
real
he
president
didn't
for you.
do anything.
That's the leader.
What happened
Trump,
was Pfizer and
2024.
biotech. Okay, the
What?
drug companies came out with it. Trump doesn't
No,
know
he
a drug
coordinated the drug company effort, Nick.
No,
Yes,
it was just
Peter is
all he
100%
did is
right.
all he
Nick,
did is
he
allowed
got the drug companies
allowed
together
to be
and
approved. The
and
drugs
they
are
Thank you,
made
accelerated.
Peter.
by the drug company. It wasn't made by Trump. Trump doesn't know how to make a bloody drug.
Nick, it sounds
Trump
like you're just
failed
like
chemistry.
CNN, basically.
You know,
You just believe
he
everything that they
failed
say.
biology,
and
he
don't
failed
look at
chemistry.
anything else.
The only
It's
reason
totally untrue.
the
You know,
only
this is
reason
why the
the
country's
only reason we
divided,
talk
because-
about him is he inherited money. That was it.
Republicans
This is
rely
why
on
the country's
facts.
divided.
Democrats rely on
He's
emotion.
a
It's very
complete,
important.
complete waste of a human being.
Nick,
You know, when God created
Nick,
humans,
This is
he-
why the
he-
He's
country's
he- he-
not
divided.
he-
rich by inheriting money. By year 2000, he lost every penny of the 400
That's because he's
million.
He did have problems. He did have
He
Absolutely.
problems.
didn't have problems.
He
Are you
lost
kidding?
And so did
everything.
everybody
He
who
was
invested in
penniless,
Atlantic
and
City.
no U.S. bank would
That's
touch
right,
him.
Peter. That's exactly right.
Now, how
Everybody-
can you lose
I'm
money
from
in
New Jersey.
Wait.
Casino is a positive, cash positive business. So
But you're
you,
just giving the
you
CNN
can actually
clip.
get a lot of money by running casinos.
Wait,
But
you're
you lost.
giving the CNN
States.
clip without
There-
yeah.
there's only one thing.
Number
See,
two,
they don't let me talk.
when
Only
no
one thing we can
U.S.
thank Donald
bank would
Trump for.
touch him by the year 2000.
Thank
Let's-
Donald
He
Trump that he's
came
out of
up
office.
through the Russian mafia money. KGB cultivated Trump from the late 70s. 87, he was already in Moscow. He is
Yeah.
a man cultivated by KGB. So he could never be entrusted to run foreign policy of United States.
Hold
And
on.
You guys owe Mr.
you-
Trump an apology. Very
You know,
much
just
so.
throwing
Hey,
out a
okay,
lot of
Hey,
okay.
Hey,
Very
Adam and
soon,
Peter,
very
hold on a
soon,
second. I
all
wanna hear-
that information will be public. You will
They
know
go
all
on
about
and
it.
on, but they don't let
Yeah.
anybody
There-
else.
there we
know.
go. Our
Hey, Adam and
commentators
Peter, I
correct.
do
Just
want to hear
throwing
from
out a
Adam
lot
and
of-
Peter, but
Nobody-
I have a
lot of-
counterpoint to something that they said, and then I want to hear their answers to it.
Look,
Because both,
you're
hold a
giving
second, because Adam made
CNN
the point.
clips.
Adam made the point that he said about the wealth and how the African Americans ought to be proud of what Trump did and everything. There was actually a study in a university not that far from me, but it wasn't just that university. It was also Wisconsin, Duke, and a couple of others that talked about the wealth gap that exists and everything. This was in 2020. I believe that was the year that Trump was still in office and everything. And it said, for example, while more than a quarter of white families have a net worth surpassing $1 billion to place them into the wealthiest quintile of all households, only 4% of black families can say the same. Only 4%. And strikingly, middle-income blacks have wealth levels more similar to those of the poorest white households, is what the research found out and everything. So you're saying that there ought to be some things going on when there is a wealth gap that is going on as well. And the part of that was under the Trump administration.
Yeah, that's something
Can I
you can thank
respond to
Donald
that?
Trump for. Thank
Please.
you
Can
for the
First of all-
wealth
we
gap.
say anything?
I would never trust any study from Duke or Wisconsin, which are infiltrated with overwhelmingly liberal professors, like the rest of academia.
You mean good universities. I
And
understand.
second, the wealth gap is not due, like all academics want you to believe, to racism. It's also due to choices. And one of those choices is single parent families. And statistics overwhelmingly show 73% of African American children grow up in single parent families. So when we want to look at disparities, we have to look at the whole picture about why you have those disparities without reducing it to racism. And again, any study from Wisconsin and Duke is about as valuable as monopoly money.
So you
guess what?
take
I had
great
a young lady on
universities
here. Hold on a second,
with
Nick. Guess
peer
what?
review.
But I respect your opinion.
studies.
So I
Those
want
go
to
out.
time out here
that
for a
sounds great.
second
That
because I
sounds
didn't
great.
get in the scrum. But Peter's been wanting to say something, and then I want to get
Yes,
my
go for it.
2 cents in. But go ahead, Peter.
Okay, so look, Sasha and Nick threw out about 10 CNN type clips. You know,
You
there's
mean
no
valid
depth
comments?
to it.
Yes, I understand.
Wait, hello? Can I finish?
Sure.
You throw out these clips. Oh, Trump is this. Trump is a Russian spy. Trump is this. Trump is that. So you have to go to a little more depth. Look, in 2000, Trump invested. He had about 180 businesses, by the way. You can Google this. It's not like a secret. He's done tremendously well with a lot of his business. He ran one of the most successful shows on television. He became president. People didn't even think he could become a nominee. He's been successful in a lot of things. He's a billionaire. But in terms of the 2000 bankruptcy, I'll delve into that a second. He invested a lot of money in Atlantic City, and so did a lot of other people, and Atlantic City fell apart. They never developed anything outside the casinos. They thought they were going to develop it into like a Vegas, but it never happened. And he had a lot of money in the casinos, but he also had it in separate corporations like he's smart enough to do. So that was that. In terms of the election, he didn't say, I want a revolution. He said, I think the election was stolen from me. And just like Al Gore did, and other presidents have felt that too. And he had a right to do that. He didn't. The people who went in there, a couple of hundred people, not millions, who went in there that day, didn't have the right to invade the Capitol. But that wasn't on him. He said, gather peacefully. I want to be heard. The courts never.
Because this is very misleading what you're saying. He did not say make it peaceful. No. He said only one word. But 45 minutes he was talking and inciting people actually to march. And one more thing. This
Did you
insurrection
watch them?
didn't start on January 6th. It was planned very carefully all preceding weeks prior to that. It was all prepared very thoroughly. It was a coup, and you'll see what's happened in the next few months.
A protest was planned, but a peaceful protest.
No,
Look, the
absolutely
courts, wait, if I can finish, the courts have never heard the evidence. I have seen the evidence, and I have lots of questions about the election. We could do a show on it, but I have seen the evidence, and there's a lot of questions about the elections. If I'm not going to get into the whole thing, but first of all, he won 17 out of 18 bellwethers. So you go, how could that happen? How could he win 17, 18 bellwethers? He won Ohio, he won Florida, he won all these different things that people normally win. But if you subtract six cities with historically very corrupt records, 6 cities in which each in these cities in the middle of the night, the Republicans poll watchers were thrown out. The whole spread, if you had 20,000 votes swung the other way, Trump would have won a specific 20,000 in the 6 cities.
Then how he won the 2016 election?
Find me the 11,000 votes,
He
Secretary
won-
of State of Georgia. Find me 11,000 votes.
Those
I don't
11,000.
care where you find them.
if
Find
you
me.
look-
Oh, by the way, Mike Pence changed the election. Mike Pence changed the election.
Yeah,
Come
he
on, the
thought
guy's
he
a
won.
complete
He
fraud.
thought he
Well,
won, and he
I
had a
think-
right
not
to
not
win.
when he goes.
Hold on a second.
He goes.
And he
tell
won
the
in 16
Secretary
on
of
the
State-
Electoral College,
He tells
not
the
the
Well, but he
majority.
didn't
Secretary
win
of
the
State,
people's vote.
You're
I
going to
mean,
vote
and
for
not
a
a
guy
single-
who tells the
that's
Secretary of State.
that's a
find
whole
11,000.
TV show in
Hold on a second,
itself.
Kim.
It is. It is.
Not a
That
single
is
person.
we
But my
should
point
do
is,
it.
he had a right. He had a right to be heard, and no court would ever hear they were afraid to look at the evidence, I think, but no court ever saw the evidence. But I've seen some of the evidence, and at least I have questions about it. I'm not saying whether he won or not, because that would be way too controversial. But
Well,
I'm saying
hold on.
at
Now,
least it should have been
He won
heard.
the
It
first
should have been heard.
I've seen
Hold
the
on a
evidence
second,
too,
okay?
and there are some serious questions. And what really
Exactly.
troubles me tonight is that not a single panelist has thanked President Trump for helping the middle class, for securing the border, for getting a vaccine in record time, for having the lowest African American and Hispanic unemployment rate. And I think that you guys owe Mr. Trump an apology for that. I really
Well,
do.
I want to
The
add
only thing we
something.
can
He
thank
didn't-
Donald Trump is he didn't completely destroy the country like he did his university, his airline, and also his casino.
There is a place on
That's the only thing we
Biden
can
is
thank
CNN.
doing right
Thank
this
Donald
year.
Trump for not
You
completely
mean like
destroying
Biden is
it.
doing this year, Nick?
So Adam, he didn't completely secure the border. It still has issues.
Well, if he had been
It
reelected,
didn't completely fix the vaccines. It still had issues. But the thing is I will say this: if I'm going to thank anyone, it's Biden, who placed a law many years ago to help violence for victims and women, where there are 12 million women a year that are victims, and it's the worst crime that an officer's dispatched for, and one where there's more fatality rates for officers. And Biden is the one who placed a law to help the victims. 12 million female victims a year, that's 24 a minute.
There we go. There's a thank you to Joe
Anyone,
Biden.
it is
baby.
That
him
was before
for
he was
doing
president,
that
though.
and
Yeah.
continuing that law, which Trump tried to stop supporting when he was in office. So if you want to take a look at, we spend $9.8 billion. That's another show in itself, and Mark knows it because I've been asked many times.
Kimberly has an excellent point. You have an excellent point, Kimberly, and I will
Yes, I
thank
do.
President Biden for that. And I
Yeah,
expect you will thank President Trump for his accomplishments and understand in 2024, we're going to make America great again.
There
Wait,
was
Kim,
no
Kim, Kim,
accomplishment.
Kim,
There was
Kim,
nothing
Kim, Kim,
finished.
Please
Wait,
don't
can I
say
go
that.
ahead, Kim, say-
No, just because you
This could be the
start
most-
I
something
thank
doesn't mean
President
it's done.
Biden, but you ingrates will not thank President Trump. I find
wait,
that
I'd like to
troubling.
build
I'm very
on something
upset.
Kim said.
Let me see.
Kim,
Wait,
Kim.
I'm going to thank him for not insulting me yet. So I
Personally,
will thank him for that. Because he never got.
No, I have a really important point. Let me make this point. Let me
point.
make
thank
this.
Donald Trump for
Because
not
Kim
completely
reminded me.
destroying
Wait,
the
Hold on a
listen,
second.
listen. Here's the thing. You reminded me of what I think the most important point, which is I'm getting back to the media too. But here's the thing about Biden. Biden, that happened before he was president, Kim. And Biden would have been if he had been what he was. First of all, he might have been a really good president. He ran as a moderate. And he could have been a great president, but of course there were so many bad decisions on the border, on crime and everything. But here's the problem. Here's the problem for the Democratic Party. And I was explaining this to my friend. For years, I've been arguing the mainstream media is so unfair because they never report anything. You know, everything's so slanted. They won't report any positive story on any conservative issue or any for Trump or anything. But here's my point. They've hurt the Democratic Party now so much because they've sheltered the Democratic Party from issues and from realities. So the Democrats have now become the party of we can say anything we want. We can say crazy theories. You know, the one that comes to mind was Trump is a Russian spy. But, you know, other crazy theories like, you know, voter ID is racist. So,
or like QAnon.
But the point is, the reason they've been able to go this far left, and the reason that they don't realize they're too far left,
I didn't think
reason
QAnon
why
was left.
they've been taken over by leftists to a good point, although there's still division within the party, is because the liberal media refuses to, they only push things left. So they keep pushing them more and more to the left. And the people are not going to like it in the next 2 elections. You will see that. I mean, it doesn't matter.
QAnon isn't a crazy theory.
To lean one direction.
Nobody said it
Trump started that. He started this lean heavy one direction, us and them. Trump started the us and them era. But it's always been that way. You know what? I'm not going to give all the credit to him but this division needs to stop. And he should have been the leader to unite us during the worst tragedy of our time. You know, George Bush did. He united us.
Did you see him on Celebrity Apprentice? The guy runs the circus clown. He's a circus clown. He's not going to unite anything.
I think the real problem that one of the real problems that we have to briefly address is this. Nick, Trump's tax cut, and by virtue, Trump himself, put more money in your pocket, and you're calling him a jerk. That's very ungrateful. And I'm surprised you would do that without giving him proper credit. And that's the problem in this country. We're so divided that we don't listen to facts, rely on facts to objectively assess candidates. If someone gave me money, I wouldn't call them a jerk. That's essentially what we did tonight. Nick, you should apologize.
No, I've got to argue that because, you know, not everybody got that. And I am going to call him a jerk for giving Nick more money in his pocket. Didn't need it.
Terrible.
Yeah, okay, but we need to find out who the winner is.
We're about to find out who the winner is. I'm about to release some of that and everything.
You had 455,000 views. Mark, who is the winner of this election? We've got to find out.
Drum roll and a big time surprise of everybody because the results have come in, and surprisingly, and I don't know that Adam will find it as much of a surprise, but for this particular poll, the last poll that we did going into President's Day, yes, our current president is the winner, and he actually won by a handy amount and all of that. And like I said, that is the current results. If you want to go by the overall results over several weeks over, then we might have to have like 2 winners as well. And that's what I was arguing for, because one, he's only had 1 year in term, but in terms of the latest results, yes, it was Mr. Biden that won, and he won handily. Trump came in second place. The other 2 candidates barely got
the scores,
any
Mark?
votes. I'm getting ready to give you the scores as well. And while I'm pulling up those scores, and maybe we'll go a little bit over, if that's okay with the bosses and everything, because they're the ones in charge and everything. I was going to bring up that on a show that we did earlier today, we actually had somebody from Sasha's area, or at least they're teaching there, even though they used to teach at UCLA, McGill University, and they actually brought up some points that Adam brought up, which is the fact that we do need to address a lot of things around class and not just race. But they also made a very interesting point that I think Kimberly and everybody on this panel will find very interesting, which is that the majority of the quote unquote welfare queens are, guess what? Not African American. The majority of the folks that are in that category are actually out of the European American category, but we never hear that part of the story. So that is one of the things.
What was the percentage that Joe got versus Trump?
I'm getting to pull that all up and everything.
Wait a minute. This just came in. Just a minute. The election was stolen. This came from Donald Trump. He believes this was stolen also. As well.
Is he watching?
No. He was watching it and he felt that it was stolen.
He thought it was stolen, Mark. You got it wrong. He thinks he won this one too.
He won this one as well. Well, the
But
results, and
unfortunately,
these
Joe
are the
Biden
results that we heard and everything. I'm also going to just mention a couple of the comments. Obama, 6%. Bush Sr., the one that I know Sasha really likes and everything, 1%.
Wow.
Trump, 25%.
Ooh.
And yes, in a whopping amount, Mr. Biden got 67% of the votes
Whoa.
in the
Wow.
latest results.
Well,
Now,
he
you
wins
know,
the
we did
election.
say-
Thank
we did
you.
say-
Whoa.
President
it was
ever.
very
There you guys
surprising.
go.
We did say everything earlier about some write-ins, and I did get some interesting write-in categories.
How much
Sandy
did you win by?
Hager
What was
said
his
that they
percentage?
would like to have had Reagan in the last category and
Okay.
all of that. There were some people, including, of course, our good friend Kimberly, that would have liked to have seen Lincoln in the list as well. And there was somebody that actually wanted Carter because they said that Trump shouldn't be considered as the worst president. Where is Carter? That was actually the question that they
Lincoln in
asked
the
and
mix.
everything. And you will love these comments. These are ones that I really love, particularly as I don't know if they were reading all that much, but I got comments like this. Obviously, they may hate his mouth and tweets, but his achievements were many. I would list them, but leftists wouldn't care. It wouldn't matter. Childish emotions apparently overwhelm intelligence and honesty. So these were some folks that originally thought that Trump was going to be losing in that sense. And Kimberly, they also put in this lovely quote that I think people will find interesting. James Bine, who is with the U.S. Navy, said, "This is like looking at a lineup of sexual predators and asking which one would be the best overnight babysitter. Politicians have a lower approval rating than used car salesmen." So I love that quote. They said, "This is like
Send that to me. Oh my
That
gosh.
actually is pretty good.
Those 4 presidents, it's a tough job.
I guess so. But we have our winner today. I don't know if he's going to contest it or not. The election may have been stolen, but maybe not. But it seems to me the winner was Joe Biden. What do you say, 61 or 67?
66, I think it is.
I believe it was 67. Let me go back to those.
67% of the vote. Wow, that's not a win. Joe wins
Thank
in
you,
a
Adam.
landslide. He wins in a landslide. So we're going to have to send him an award. Where is he living now? We'll send
He's
an
at the White
award.
House.
Delaware.
Yeah, he's in the White House.
I
Oh,
thought it
and
was-
by the way,
I thought it was
I
an
also
old
got to
time.
like. I sometimes
When
wonder.
I was in a
we're talking
nursing
about
home,
media and
Peter.
everything. I sometimes wonder what people are reading when they're reading the results. Because at the time that I was looking at the results, it was clear that Biden was winning, and Tracy Ann Whitehall, who was very much involved in the rodeo and stuff, and I want to say one of the Dakotas, wrote, "Wow, your results need to wake up." She's an avid Trump supporter, and I'm going like, "Were you reading the same thing that I was?" Because even in her thing, she says that she defends Trump all the time. So I'm going like, what were you reading? And Ryan Ralston agreed because he was saying at least 28% need to wake up, meaning the 28% at that time that had voted for Trump. So I'm going like,
Yeah, and you know what?
were
I
you
think
looking at?
I think the best way to end this show would be for Nick to apologize to Mr. Trump. For his insults tonight,
why
if
would I-
Mr.
I'll
Trump
be the
gave
loser.
him
He
money,
lost
I think
again.
that's the right thing
Hey,
to
look,
do. I know you
thank
have
you.
I
integrity.
think we just better end the show because it is
Well,
9:03.
One last question to all panelists.
But
Trump's 2024. There will be an election between Trump and Hillary. Who is going
No.
to win?
No, I think that
Adam,
already.
I'm going to write in Adam. I'm going to write in Adam, and
I think
then
that
it's
already
gonna be a
I would be happy to help
Yeah.
make America even greater again.
But
There you go.
we all have to congratulate once again Joe Biden beating Donald Trump. He
Wait,
beats Donald
wait,
Trump all the
Adam,
time,
to help you out here, I do have something
Congratulations.
that Nick can thank Trump for.
which
He
is-
can thank Trump for us having this awesome show because without
Right,
the
without
world hating him
There
and
we go.
loving him all at once, we
There
would
we
have
go.
never had
Yeah.
this.
right.
Agreed.
And
And speaking of which, I have a question for y'all as we go into the month of March and April because I need a break and I got to do some other polls and everything. But I think, based on what Sasha has said, that instead of the first ladies and everything, that maybe starting in either late March or early April, we should start a new series. The world's worst leaders. And yes, Mr. Trudeau could be in that. The guy from Korea can be in that. And we can even bring back Trump and Biden.
will we be
I-
in danger of
So-
assassination?
no. Actually, okay, Peter, that's how we create friends all over the world.
That's
is
how we
creating
get
shows like that.
assassinated.
Yeah, I agree with Peter.
Okay, yes, and well, we should end the show because Joe Biden, once again, you beat Donald Trump, and you're going to get the award. We'll send you an award to become this year's world's worst president. We'll see you next time on the
All
world's
right.
worst president. Goodbye.